So where did the term tip originate? According to Business Insider on October 22nd of 2015, the word tip is actually an acronym that stands for to ensure promptitude. This acronym speaks volumes to the root of tipping and has encouraged discrimination and unfair payment practices for its workers. Now, I've been working in the restaurant industry for close to 10 years now, and I've seen how this tipping structure has negatively impacted not just the pockets, but the mental well-being of myself and my coworkers. This practice is common across the United States, so it's likely that you or someone you know and care about has been impacted by this tipping structure. So that's why today I'm going to be talking about the problems associated with our current tipping structure, where those problems originated, and how we can eradicate that system in order to benefit the worker. So let's talk about the problems first. Tipping is a system that allows for unfair payment practices and discrimination against its employees. In the United States, tipped workers are only required to be paid $2.13 an hour by their employers. This is known as the sub-minimum wage. And that $2.13 an hour is only supplemented by an employer if a tipped employee's wages do not equal that of $7.25 an hour. This puts the obligation of paying a tipped employee's almost entire salary in the hands of the customer. Somehow, despite every other industry's acquiescence, the restaurant industry has managed to avoid responsibility for paying their employees' entire salary. So how has that affected employees? Well, according to Vox on December 19th of 2014, despite employment in the restaurant industry increasing over 85% since the 1990s, the poverty rate of tipped workers is almost double that of every other worker. Vox goes on to say that also tipped workers are 3 times more likely to be on food stamps. So can we make the argument that these statistics prove that restaurants are in fact growing, hence the need for new employees? And with growth comes income. So why can't these restaurants afford to pay their employees' entire salary? What's also evident based on these poverty rates is that customers are not to be relied on to consistently tip enough for these employees to have a living wage. So with the bulk of the financial responsibility in the hands of the customer, the issue of discrimination comes into play. Power dynamics are created by the customer's ability to withhold tips whenever they see fit. And this is a breeding ground for racism and sexism. According to Michael Lynn's Consumer Racial Discrimination in Tipping, a replication and extension on March 19th of 2008, customers tip white workers more than their black counterparts. But the racism doesn't stop there. According to NPR on July 11th of 2003, servers feel that black Americans tip less than white diners. Now this affects the quality of service of servers of all races. So the pendulum swings both ways when it comes to racism in this tipping structure. So let's move on to how women are affected by this tipping structure. According to the New York Times on October 15th of 2015, 70% of tipped workers are female. Tipping creates a toxic power dynamic, usually between male customers and female workers, where the tipper takes advantage of their position of the one providing money and usually results in some kind of sexual harassment on their part. The New York Times also states in this article that the sub-minimum wage model currently in place is the reason that the restaurant industry is the #1 source of sexual harassment claims in the United States. So how did these unhealthy tipping practices come about? Well, I believe that both its racist roots and the restaurant industry's reliance on the current tipping structure for financial exploitation of its employees. Well, while tipping originated in feudal Europe, it really got its start and took off in post-Civil War United States. With the slaves freed by Emancipation Proclamation, employers looked to tipping as a means of continuing exploitation of black workers. With providing extremely low salaries, black workers had to rely almost solely on tips. Politico magazine on July 17th in 2019 refers to the famous Pullman porters. They were freed black men who were hired by George Pullman to work as porters on his sleeper cars. He hired them knowing he could provide extremely low wages and that they would have to pretty much entirely rely on the tips of others. The racist roots created that system that made it easy for restaurants to financially exploit their employees. Restaurants notoriously work within a small profit margin. They're expensive to own, they're expensive to maintain, and they're constantly trying to find ways to cut back on spending. The current tipping model is a godsend for restaurants who are trying to cut corners. This benefit is the reason that this practice remains in play today. So how can we eradicate these problems associated with the current tipping structure? Well, the first step is to eradicate the tipping structure and the sub-minimum wage that's in place currently. And then we need to put in place a higher federally mandated minimum wage. Then restaurants can supplement as they see fit with higher prices for goods and services. The Raise the Wage Act is the biggest step lawmakers have made in the last decade to adjust and raise the minimum wage and get rid of the sub-minimum wage that affects tipped workers. This bill would raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2024. While this is a step in the right direction, it is not enough for even the smallest families to live on. We need legislature that calls for a higher mandatory minimum and fluctuates with inflation and mitigating factors. On a micro level, restaurants can adapt their pricing to account for their staff's wages. According to a survey of my fellow students, 60% said they would be willing to pay more for goods and services if that meant they no longer had to tip. Service fees are common and successful practices that are being used in restaurants today and allows for their employees to be paid higher salaries and no longer subject to power dynamics. So today I've informed you of the negative impacts of our current tipping system, how those problems came about, and how we can replace this system in order to benefit the worker. I hope this perspective has changed the way you think about tipping and its effects on likely many people you know and love. Thank you.